The DIESOL Podcast,
Digital Integration in English as a Second or Other Language.
Episode 30, ISTE Standards and Esol.
Welcome to DIESOL. This is episode 30. We are your hosts. I am Brent Warner.
And I'm Michelle Reyes. Hey, Brent. Happy December.
Happy December. Happy episode 30. Some exciting stuff. We made it through Thanksgiving and everything, so that's nice.
I know, it's felt like forever, but we made it through the year.
Yeah. And sorry to those people who were hoping that we were going to do Drinks with DIESOL. We did end up canceling that one. So we hope you had some nice drinks with friends or family instead. So end of the year, we're getting close. Any upcoming plans for you, Michelle?
Just gonna visit my family, so I'll be in California, socially distancing and being
we're
careful.
Pretty locked down right now.
I know. I'm totally happy to be locked down as long as it's with other human beings.
Yeah, fair enough. So we are moving into the end here, and the end of the beginning of the end. I don't know, whatever we are at, but
either one of those.
Yeah. So let's get to it. Today we're talking about ISTE standards in ESOL. And I think we've got quite a lot to talk about here, and we'll try to kind of, we'll do our best to present everything that's important. I think let's just jump right over to it. Okay, so ISTE. Why are we talking about ISTE standards compared to TESOL? So this is kind of the last of our little series about standards. We've been doing that for a few episodes now. This is the third episode. And we kind of thought, hey, we wanted to talk about the TESOL stuff, which we did in episodes 26 and 28, respectively, right? And now here we are at ISTE. And I think there's going to be a lot of people listening that are going, what's ISTE? So, so Michelle, what is ISTE first?
Well, ISTE is an organization. It is the International Society for Technology and Education. And of course, it is technology and education. So for those people who are often called, others will call you the techie or the person who's tech savvy, this is the place where you go to share all of your ideas, to learn more, and also to get a framework for what you're doing, because we're not just doing tech for the sake of tech, right? There's frameworks, and also to look at how that plays into our students, what our students are learning in school, so K through 12 and others. So
yeah. And also, ISTE really is the big organization that talks about technology and education. They have a very large annual conference, which actually I think it's actually still happening as we're recording right now. I am not signed up this year. I'm kind of conferenced out, but virtual conferenced out. So, but there's a lot of cool stuff. I've seen friends posting about it on Twitter. So anyways, ISTE, International Society for Teachers in Education.
Technology.
Teachers in Education. We're almost to the end of the month here. Technology and education. So here's the deal, though. We need to talk about this why, right? Why are we talking about ISTE? Because we said, hey, we did all those TESOL ones. Like, I think I get it, right? I would say that the TESOL ones fit under ISTE standards in a way that I actually kind of hope that TESOL kind of moves more towards this with their standards in the future. So what did you think when you were looking at these, Michelle? And we're going to get into the thick of them a little bit later, but let's talk about why we're talking about this.
Yeah. So one of the things, I was very, I was happy that there's TESOL standards for technology, but when we take a look at the ISTE standards, a lot of the language is broader, and we'll look at it. But because it's broader language, it allows for personalization of our students' need. Because the reality is that we might have a class that where a couple of students may be using a mouse for the first time, but the rest of them may not be. So those kind of things. If you take a look at the TESOL standards, it almost seems like it's assuming that none of your students are going to know any of this technology. And so
Yeah, it's
I don't know
almost
if that's how
like,
you felt, but
yeah, I felt like almost we kind of mentioned in the pre-show. I felt like the TESOL standards are great, but they're kind of making a really low-level assumption on where students are.
mhm,
And so, yeah, if you're doing a basic computer skills class and helping in English, for sure, right? Here's the mouse, here's
right.
click, here's all those things. Those are great to have. But at the same time, there's so much more to technology than that, and I feel like uh, kind of the TESOL standards are really step one, and and then there's a lot to grow up to and to move up to beyond that. And I think the ISTE standards are really a noble goal for teachers to kind of put their focus on, because it's not language focus. It's not really, it's not about, hey, you can do these language things. It really is technology focus, and what
Hmm.
technology can help us do to learn anything, but in our case, English language acquisition.
Right. And another thing here is that the emphasis in the language, you'll see as we go through some of the standards, that the emphasis is really on community, diversity, transformative learning, and then also roles of the learner and the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because if we take on roles and we know what our roles are, and students know what their roles are, then they're able to communicate what they're achieving with technology, right? And they're also able to see how technology is helping them to reach that goal, which in our case happens to be language or happens to be doing something through English. TESOL doesn't necessarily have that. I mean, I didn't see that clearly spelled out, but I like that it's a clear definition of what the teacher should be doing, what the role is
Yeah,
in terms of technology.
and by role, like they're basically like titles, right? And so the
Right.
way the ISTE standards work is they call you a learner or a leader or a citizen, and like how do you live up to that role is what you're saying here, which is great, as compared to teachers will be able to show students blah blah blah, right? And so that to me is two different things, and
Sure.
even though they might overlap, it to me when you say, hey, you are a learner, right? That to me means something different than you demonstrate ability to uh, I don't know, whatever, put together these two tools or something like that. So I really like the idea of the roles here. And then the
Hmm.
the last part that I was thinking about here, Shell, is like, to me, I really felt like the TESOL standards, and again, go back and listen to those episodes because I do think they're valuable, but I also feel like those are kind of telling students, here is a hammer. Can you say hammer? Hammer, right? Can you say nail? Nail, right? And then you're really learning the basics of those fundamental skills. But that is like, here's a hammer and a nail. Do you know how to hammer the nail into a board, right? Okay, yeah, this is what we're showing, but this is a totally different level than, do you know how to design a house, right? To design and build a house that you want to live in. And go, oh, okay, hold on a second. So we're really granular and kind of, fundamental skills here.
Hmm.
And it's not completely like that, but it feels more like that to me as compared to like with ISTE is like, okay, we have those, we're assuming those basic technology skills kind of, and then what are the next steps? What can tech help us do beyond that?
Sure. And I just wanted to add to that. If you do feel like the students aren't a majority of your students don't come to you with the basics of what a hard drive does, what a computer is, and that's something that you would take care of in a basic computer skills class, as you said before. So that would be, totally different
Mm-hmm.
than trying to cover the core content subjects.
Yeah, and those are great skills. So, Shelley, you were mentioning earlier that you sometimes have students that show up and don't know what a
Hmm.
mouse is and don't know,
Hmm.
and so we need to approach those. We need to help those students out. But many, 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 many of our students do have fundamental, basic ideas of technology. It seems to me less common that they're coming in not having heard of a computer. It's just not really a thing. I was reading a statistic recently. It said 50% of households in the world, and this is worldwide, have computer access in their household, right? And so that to me says, you're going to have, 50% in the world have it inside of their house, which it's kind of a shocking number in a certain way. You're like, really? It's only 50%? But that also means that every other person walking around in the world has a computer in their house, which probably says most of the other people know what some level of computer things are too, right?
Right. And they're moving forward. I mean, while some places or some communities overseas may not have a computer in their household, they do have internet cafes. And so many of them are used to going to some place like that. So I think the further we go, the more time passes, the more our students are going to be familiar with those tools. So, and of course, it's important to identify the ones that, don't come with those basic skills. But I think we're seeing more and more our students do come with some level of skills, even if that's a mixed bag within the classroom.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second, Esol, about how the ISTE standards have evolved, right?
Yeah. So
this is a pretty cool find you found hidden in there, but it's like, oh, this is great.
Well, this is really cool for me as an ESOL, instructor, because and also as someone who promotes the use of technology in the classroom with my students, not just for learning language, but, knowing how to use technology makes you a more competitive candidate, no matter where you are. Whatever you're going to be doing after you pass your English courses, you're going to need to compete with other people, or you're going to sometimes be asked to take on a role that maybe as a project manager, maybe as someone who's designing something or planning or delegating. And if you've got these skills that you've now transferred, then that makes you someone who's a better candidate or someone who's going to do a really good job. So I always like to see where we are. And at the bottom on the ISTE Standards for Students, if you scroll all the way to the bottom on their website, and I kind of wish they had this at the top because it's cool. They've got this little timeline, and it says, how have the ISTE Standards for Students evolved? And so they start from 1998. So in 1998, it was learning to use technology. Okay, 9 years later, 2007, using technology to learn. Okay, and then 2016, which is the most recent version of these standards, we're at transformative learning with technology.
Yeah. So let's break that down for a second. So if the ISTE standards back in 98 are learning to use technology, right? That really is the TESOL standards that we've been talking about, right? Like,
yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. That's what they're talking about. And again, I don't want to minimize it. I don't want to say like, hey, none of the stuff we talked about before is important. Like that's not the goal here. But what we're trying to say is like, ESL desperately needs to catch up, right? Our field is just so far behind all the time that we need to start paying attention to these things. So for TESOL, they their last iteration was 2008, and that was 10 years behind. That's 12 years ago now, right? Almost 13 years ago, and that's 10 years behind where ISTE was in 1998, right? And so we got to say, okay, well, hold on a second. We got a lot of catching up to do. We got a lot of kind of processing and understanding of how technology affects our learning needs to be applied. So then 2007, using technology to learn, right? What does that mean to you, Esol?
To me, it's like we're no longer focusing on the individual technology. That's just something expected as you're going to some, whatever goal it is that you're learning, whether it's science, whether it's grammar, but you're using the tools as something to help you. It's not that you're focused on the tools, right? And of course, students do need to know how to use them. But again, if they're getting an education where English is going to be the goal as the medium, whether they're going to university or getting another job, they need to be able to use those tools. That's expected, right? That's just like an expectation. It's not do you know how to use Microsoft Word? It's
Yeah.
now, can you use it in the cloud? Can you use this? Can you collaborate? Can you use live, live updated or live updating tools?
Well, to me, it's also that this is like crash in, right? Really, like, hey, it's the
Hmm.
immersive experience. We're going to be talking about, um, you know, we're going to be talking about this book that we're reading. We're going to be collaborating on this. We're going to be sharing our notes and giving feedback to one another on Google Docs or whatever it is, right? We're not really talking about Google Docs. We're talking about the
Hmm.
novel that we're reading. We're talking about sharing
Hmm.
ideas. We're talking about how to type together, even though we're all in our own houses here in the pandemic, right? That to me is using the technology to learn. And yeah, of course, I need to spend some time with my students saying, "Hey, this is how Google Docs works, right? This is how you share a document for sure." But I'm not teaching a class on Google Docs. I'm teaching a class on whatever we're learning, and we're just using the technology as the method for moving through
Hmm.
that. But
Right.
that's still 2007, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
like we gotta talk about this, right? Okay, so Google Docs, of course, came out after 2007, but still, like the idea here of like the frame that you're looking at it through is still way back in 2007. So we're back, again, 13, almost 14 years ago now at this point.
Mm.
And so then we move forward into 2016 for ISTE Standards, which is transformative learning with technology, right?
Hmm.
I think we're going to have to talk about this version a little bit more in the future, Ishel.
Hmm. Hmm.
We had mentioned that we need to do a SAMR episode.
Hmm.
And for those who don't know what
Summer
SAMR is,
model.
yeah, the SAMR model. I think we'll probably do that for the first episode in
Okay,
January.
January.
Yeah, because
Back to basics.
back to basics, making sure we understand all of these things. But really about like what are the things that you can really do that you could never have done before, right? So
Yeah.
how does the technology completely reinvent our understanding of learning and of what we can do and how we can get a lot better. So I think that's what we're going
Hmm.
to be looking at here. So I think that these are really powerful to look at. I hope that they can be kind of a guide for TESOL organizations in the future as well. That's what we want to start seeing. It's just so cool to be able to look at this because this is again, it's what lens are we looking at technology through? Is it just, hey, do you know how to click on something? Or is it, let's communicate with each other and spread our message out to the world by
Hmm.
language that we've just learned to acquire and are now practicing with? There's just so much more to that.
Hmm.
So now I think we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna jump over and actually look at the individual standards. All right, so Ishel, iTunes. We haven't had we had a review a little bit ago. We'd love to
Hmm.
get more. One thing that we noticed is that we've got a lot of star reviews, so people are on their apps or whatever and hitting the stars. But we also would love to get those written reviews, right?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really help people see if they want to check out the show, and it's crazy how much it does for like bumping up the show when people type in things. If there's more reviews from people saying, hey, this is a show you should check out. So if you guys like the
Yeah.
show,
It also gives us feedback. Personally, I like to read the ones where they comment on a specific show, because then it tells me, okay, that one compelled someone to write something, because it is harder to sit, to write a review. So if you do hear us right now, I'm asking in 2021, leave us some written reviews.
yeah, do something nice for this would be a Christmas present for us, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get us a Christmas present, leave us a review. Also, though, we haven't mentioned this very much. We have the Buy Us a Coffee, so on the website. If you like the show, if you think it's been useful, there's a little button on diesel.org that you can click to buy us a coffee. A few people have done this in the past, and it's been very kind. That all just kind of goes into our little piggy bank, which we're trying to decide if we're going to use that for paying for hosting or for swag. Normally, I guess it's going to go like stickers and things like that. But if you like, you can also use Buy Us a Coffee. All right, so Esol, we're gonna have to move fairly quick because there's a lot of these, but
There's a lot.
These ISTE standards. So we're not going to go into the details, just like we didn't go into the details in the past. But let's. There are 7 ISTE standards for teachers, and then there are 7 ISTE standards for students. As you said, they're kind of broken down into roles, right? Like what is your role doing this? And so let's start off with we're going to start off with the ISTE standards for teachers. So what is the first role?
Okay, so the first role is, and again, this is for teachers. The first role is learner. Educators continually improve their practice by learning from and with others and exploring proven and promising practices that leverage technology to improve student learning. And I think that's pretty powerful here already. And it's very defining.
Yeah, it's a great first step here. They, one, if you're listening to the show, you probably are the type of person who is a learner, right? Because you're saying, hey, how can I find ways to build out my practice, or, to improve my practice and then get better at it and talk to other people, interact. Podcast listeners are learners. And so I think that this is a great step, but it's also a great way to define people, because when teachers define themselves as learners, it really transforms in my thinking.
Okay, so the second role is the teacher as a leader. Educators seek out opportunities for leadership to support student empowerment and success and to improve teaching and learning. And again, I think most of us, we know that we're leaders, but we're actively seeking out opportunities that are going to be supporting our students. I don't know what else to say about this one.
I have a brief comment on this one. So, sometimes when we get like full-time jobs coming up as opportunities or whatever, I get some teachers who say, well, I want the chance to, it would really be great for me to become this, a full-time teacher. And to me, I'm like, well, what are you doing in the leadership role, right? Because sometimes it's just like, I'm just teaching and I disappear and that's it, right? And no qualms necessarily with just being a teacher, but like getting full-time positions can be really hard, especially these days, right? And so like when you're showing that you have leadership, when you're seeking out those opportunities, this is the type of thing that like at our school, at least when we're hiring, they're all different types of leaders, but like, what are you doing that's proactive, that's helping, that's creating something new, all of those ideas. So really worth paying attention to.
Right. Okay, role number 3 is citizen. So educators inspire students to positively contribute to and responsibly participate in the digital world. I'm a big fan of this one because, number one, we are constantly talking about, we're talking about social media platforms and just public platforms. Students may know how to use them, and teachers as well. But again, what does it mean to positively contribute? Is that you sharing out material that worked for you? Is that you giving tips to other teachers or other, people that are reading? Are you blogging? Are you sharing? How are you positively contributing? And also being a responsible participant. You might have had a terrible day at work or, a terrible 2020, but you've got to be careful what you put out there because people are reading that. And that's okay. There are certain times when when you have a private network or a private, social media page. And that's what it comes to mind maybe right now because of, 2020 we've been stuck and the only place to go for information is social media. And of course that might change next year when we're hopefully back to face-to-face. But again, you've got to be responsible about what you're putting out there. Yeah. And that might mean withholding from posting something, or waiting until the right time, or also in the way that you're phrasing something. I don't know. I don't know what else I have there for this one.
Well, there's quite a debate around this actually, because right now, people are frustrated and depressed and all sorts of issues, right? And so some people are saying, don't post anything negative. And some people are saying, well, that's toxic positivity, right? Because we can't just be 100%. So I think it's actually okay to complain or to show that you have issues too when you're online, if you're being real and if you're trying to open that to a real communication. If you're just saying, hey, this is this is terrible and there is no solution to it, and I just want to complain, it's like, well, then that doesn't really help anyone. But if you're saying, hey, these are problems, I think bringing it up and bringing it to light can help other people.
Sure, exactly.
You know what I mean? So there's a difference there, and it's not, the world doesn't have to be all cheery and happy all the time.
And it isn't. Right now, to say that, in 2020, we've been super successful at moving our teaching to online teaching would be a massive lie. but
no, not a massive lie, it would be a stretch. This is the way that we do citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah, no. But you're right. Like, it totally would be, right? And so it's like, hey, this, I think, there, honesty in citizenship here kind of should not be mistaken for like one another. Like, oh, hey, positivity and honesty are not the same thing, right? Or citizenship and positivity are not the same thing. We need to isolate those.
All right. So rule number 4 is the collaborator. Educators dedicate time to collaborate with both colleagues and students to improve practice, discover and share resources and ideas, and solve problems. And
yeah, pretty straightforward.
It's collaborating.
I mean, work with other people. If you're an isolated person, I get it too. Like, you can do your own things, but like, there's so much just to share. So share, help each other out. I think we're all trying to do that. I think a lot of people are recognizing that more. Like, oh, hey, there's these people that want to help me, and who knew that I had ideas that are actually good to share too, right? A lot of us kind of talk ourselves out of that, but if you're out there, if you're teaching, I guarantee you have good ideas.
Rule number 5 is a designer. Educators design authentic, learner-driven activities and environments that recognize and accommodate learning variability. This one's great because this one's the one that gives you the ability to, or the opportunity to look for your learners that need a little bit more support versus your learners that can be more independent, or, put those independent learners with your ones that need more support, and vice versa. But again, recognizing that in the real world, the skills within the skill set within a class will vary, right? And you've got to design for that.
Yeah. Well, and also this one's the fun one too, right? Like, you get to design your lessons, you get to do all the games, you get to build things that really can show students the path through. And so, I mean, if you say, hey, my role is an education designer, ooh, that sounds so much more fun than like, I'm a teacher, right? Not to dismiss teachers, of course, but like, but I think viewing it in a different way is a great way to
word itself,
remotivate.
Design. It just, implies that you're carefully looking at something, right? You're designing. You're not just making for the sake of making and creating. You're thinking about it deeply and with a purpose in mind. And in this case, it's the needs of your students. Role number 6 is the facilitator. Educators facilitate learning with technology to support student achievement. And in this case, it's of the 2016 ISTE Standards for students.
Yeah, pretty straightforward with that one. But, how are you facilitating? How are you helping out? We talk a lot about this idea, sage on the stage versus guide on the side, right? And I think facilitator is definitely the guide on the side, and say, hey, I think you can work through this. What can I do to help you out? Not like I'm going to give you the top-down version. So
right. And finally, rule number 7 for teachers is the analyst. Educators understand and use data to drive their instruction and support students in achieving their learning goals. This one's really important because you're taking data, you're taking numbers, you're taking results to see how you're going to tweak something, how you're going to pull back, or how you're going to change something in order to achieve those goals. So
yeah,
I think that's pretty important. And if you say, hey, I'm an analyst, of course, you're looking at data all the time, right? You want to know, did your students improve? Did that strategy work? How did it work? Who did it work with? Why did it work? Can I, use that for another subject, etc.
Yeah. And I hope that also this is something that we do a lot of, in many of our shows, we try to talk about the analysis. We look at the research first, and then we talk about how do we apply that research, right? And, anyone can do that, right? Anyone has access to these, get on to your library and go find the research. And then think about it, right? So you get to analyze. I would say it even goes backwards. So analyze and then design, right? There's a great combination for bringing these together and building your student success.
Right. And I think, Brent, it's, again, one of the reasons why I think it's really important to look at the ISTE standards as we're, navigating through ESOL, is that you're reminded that you've got to stay on top of the field, right? Mm-hmm. What's going on out there. You've got to keep updated. And as an analyst, you're doing that because you're looking at what's working for other teachers, what's not working, or how are these people doing it. And I think that's really important to not get stuck, not get... we get comfortable with the strategy that we like that works for us, but is it working for your students? And is that something that are there other ways to do it that are better? So as an analyst, when you think about yourself as the teacher being an analyst, that's something that I think is really important to remember and keep in mind.
Yeah. So those are the ISTE standards for teachers, and their breakdowns and examples and ideas all on their site. We'll have them in the show notes. But next, let's transition over to ISTE standards for students. Okay, so ISTE standards for students, and we also have 7 here, and we're going to start off with empowered learner. So again, same type of setup here, Shell. They've got the titles, they've got their roles here, and what does that mean? So empowered learner. This is students leverage technology to take an active role in choosing, achieving, and demonstrating competency in their learning goals, informed by the learning sciences. So this one is saying, hey, it's not just the teacher saying, hey, here are your activities and just do them, right? How do you get the learner themselves to take control of that, right? And really understand what it means and to say, I want to set it up in this way. I want to do this type of thing, right? And that to me is this idea of an empowered learner.
Well, you're also allowing for students to be autonomous, and you're also allowing them to think for themselves and decide what the best course of action is, depending on what their assignment is, right? So if they have a choice between using Google Slides or using a Google Doc or using some kind of some other way to illustrate something, illustrate their knowledge, that's giving them autonomy, and that's the whole empowered learner, right?
That's right.
Concept of that.
Yeah. So next is digital citizen. Students recognize the rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of living, learning, and working in an interconnected digital world. And they act and model in ways that are safe, legal, and ethical.
This one's important.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about students coming from other countries where either, posting against the government might lead to, dire consequences, or the penalty for plagiarizing is, very soft. So those are things that are very important for students to understand, especially when they're going to be navigating English in a country that's not their own.
Right. And it's also, even in a small setting like inside of our class and we're interacting with each other digitally, how are we responding to one another, right? Like, is this an appropriate response? I haven't had anything that's been nasty, but of course, Zoom bombing is a great example of very poor digital citizenship. But I also the common example that I use is encouraging students to have their pictures up in our LMS, right? So have their actual face pictures, because we connect with people's faces. We connect with people's, with seeing them. And I totally understand all the arguments, of course, like the cameras don't have to be on and those types of things. But I also, I do strongly believe in just basic human psychology, that when we see a face, we are attracted to that face and to want to interact with it more than we will if we see a picture of a flower or like just some sunset or something like that. It's like, I don't know who that person is.
Right.
So
the third one?
Yep. Third one is knowledge constructor. So students critically curate a variety of resources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, and make meaningful learning experiences for themselves and others. So This one's big. There's a kind of a lot to it, and I think this is where I kind of feel that I spend my time trying to teach my students to do this.
Yeah, this one for me is the most fun as an instructor because, yes, we use the tools, we use technology, but I tell my students, look what you've created at the end of this. You have gone and you've gathered all this information. You illustrated it. You used icons. You used pictures. Those are all skills. And sometimes students don't recognize that copying and pasting and putting something on a slide, that's design. You have to think about it. It's not just, dumping information. And so, acknowledging that and letting students know that, look, you've created this, it's meaningful. That's the way that it looks for you. I'm not looking for, sometimes students want to know, teacher, what exactly do you want it to look like? Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you decide, right? And so that, helps them be more proud of the work that they're creating. And there's more of a personal connection, I feel. And they're more likely to replicate that skill in another class where maybe the instructor may not necessarily ask for that, but they're more likely to say, hey, I did this before, I built this, and I know I can do it. Let me replicate that again. And so that's where I find the most, it's just really, really rewarding when students do that.
Yeah. I taught a student how to use Adobe Spark video, and then she's been coming back and sending me emails like, I did this for this other class, and like sending me and I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
And I have a friend, a colleague of mine. I told her, I think your kids will like Spark. Let them play with Spark. Okay, mm-hmm. Kids figured it out, showed it to her, and now she's made for the last, I don't know how many days. She's on every day. She's counting down the days of the pandemic. She's got a new
does Spark. She have the end date? Because that would be really useful for me.
She's not counting them down. I guess she's counting them.
Okay,
no, I wish she were counting them. Counting up, yeah. And she's got an Adobe Spark image for every one of them. And again, she's having so much fun creating these, and she's continuing. So
cool.
Pretty cool.
All right, next is Innovative Designer. Students use a variety of technologies within a design process to identify and solve problems by creating new, useful, or imaginative solutions. What do you think about this one, Esol?
This is really cool because this is where, your students have seen several, for example, students have seen several tools, and now they get to choose what it is that they want. It's a higher level of thinking, right? Because they're not just saying, oh, teacher told us to use Google Docs. Okay, going to use Google Docs. Now they're deciding, oh, I think I can make a video for that. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, I think I want to make, again, an image like with Adobe Spark or Canva or whatever it is that they want to use. But now they're thinking of different options, right? And thinking of, assessing which one might be more effective, which one might take more time. Is there an easier way? Is there a way to combine them? And so to me, that's a different level of thinking. And that's where I think the innovation comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because how many times you've come to the show and said, I gave this to the students. I told them you have this option, and this student blew me away by doing this, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah. I'm thinking here, like when we start kind of giving some of the control over to students, so say, mm-hmm. hey, you're going to design a game around whatever we're doing this week, right? And then they're like, oh, okay, hold on. Am I going to go build a quizzes or a Kahoot or, something like that? Or, I've had some of these students building, I've shared them online, the RPG games, where it's
yes, it's exactly what I was thinking of.
And it's like, oh, like they spent all this time building this game and not, and it's like all tied into what we're doing, but they're really like having fun building games and designing it and planning out and thinking about like what works. And then I'll have conversations with them and say, well, you've got this, this distractor question, but is that really a good distractor or not? Right. And they go, oh, well, hold on a second. Yeah, maybe there's a reason why I would choose this one or another one. And so, there's a lot of cool stuff going on here.
And I want to say one more thing here, Brent, that haven't run into this often, but I do run into instructors who might say like, well, that's going to take too much time. Why do they have to use that when we're never going to play the game or et cetera? But what I guess, it's not about that end product necessarily. It's about the process that the students experience, because within that process there's problem solving, there's decision making, there is on the spot thinking, there is a lot of, again, higher level thinking, critical thinking. And so that's what students are practicing. So even if in the end their quizzes or their Kahoot, happen to have a couple of questions that could be tweaked, or if the RPG maker game, whatever module they used, didn't cover everything, but there were skills that were used in order to get there. And it's about that process and those experiences. We cannot discount that. Yeah. That's why when people will ask me, well, why do you use Flipgrid if you've got to, it takes so long for the students to do this? Like, no, but do you have any idea how many times they had to record themselves? That is practice, right? And then they were assessing their video, which means they were thinking about their video, which means there's a lot of metacognition, because they're thinking about their thinking, they're thinking about how they're going to look in front of an audience, and then they're making those tweaks. That's right. And it's those skills that sometimes get forgotten. And again, it's about the process. Yeah.
So next, and tied to that, is computational thinker. So students develop and employ strategies for understanding and solving problems in ways that leverage the power of technological methods to develop and test solutions.
Ooh, this is a big one. This is a big one. I think it goes back, and all of these build upon each other, right? Computational thinker is you're solving problems. How are you going to present this material? How are you going to present that information? Is it better as a digital board? Is it better as a slide? Is it better as a presentation that you're recording? Is it a panel of you and a couple of students? And I guess I'm thinking of it in terms of presentations right now and information, because we do so much of that in ESOL. But that's what I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah, and then this one's a little bit more complicated. I think it's worth digging into the details on it. But there are points here. It's like, how do students identify data and what's relevant and how they're going to use that, right? How do they pull out key information? And, these are skills that we've been teaching for years, right? But it's like, okay, but now we got to think of it on a different level. So it's like, if you're pulling out information out of a text, well, now how am I pulling out information from digital resources, from videos, from, researching a hashtag and figuring out what people are talking about around this topic. So I think that a lot of these things are valuable. And then there are so many ways to approach this computational thinking, which then really does lead to critical thinking, because you could say, hey, is this valid, is this not valid, and you can move forward from there. Next is creative communicator. Students communicate clearly and express themselves creatively for a variety of purposes, using the platforms, tools, styles, formats, and digital media appropriate to their goals.
This one's fun to me. I'm thinking of students know how to respond in a class discussion, right? They know that depending on the topic, you're probably not going to respond with a meme. Or if the topic lends itself, if it lends itself to it, you might respond with a meme. You might respond with a video. It's just like we talk about register in writing, knowing how to respond, or, in communication, it's the same thing. How are you going to do that, and what tools are you using? Right. And what's the appropriate tool? You might not want to do a 5-minute video for something that is a very quick, response. I'm thinking on a collaborative board or.
Yeah. Well, and I also think here, if you're learning how to communicate in different ways, for students, right? A lot of them have background knowledge, especially if they're younger, college age, something like that. They're probably on social media, and they're probably recognizing that they're presenting information in one way, but they're maybe not an influencer on Instagram or whatever it is, right? But you could actually take a look at those things and go, well, what is this person doing? How are they presenting information, right? And then they go, oh, okay, yeah, that's why they're able to do this in a better way than I am in terms of presenting information. And then I just like to think about going way back to like, what do presentations look like, right? And the traditional model is just someone standing in front of a room talking, and then maybe they had, and I'm going way back, but like a flip chart or writing on the board, or like
that
a
is
poster
way back,
lamp, right? Well, yeah, because
that's way back.
then we're talking about, okay, well, what's the next step from that? And we've seen where we ask students to do this, like do a slideshow, right? And then the slides are up while they're presenting. But very often those slides are still just like the digital version of a Flipboard, right? And so then it's like, well, what can you do next beyond that? Oh, well, I can put up a QR code and I can have the audience members scan that and interact with me while I'm actually present. You know what I mean? So they can start learning these more ways to be communicating with each other, and it's interactive communication instead of a one-way messaging. So I think there's a lot to work with in here as well.
Yes.
All right.
The last one.
The last one, Global Collaborator. Students use digital tools to broaden their perspectives and enrich their learning by collaborating with others and working effectively in teams, locally and globally.
And this is the one where we were talking about how it's giving them authentic opportunities to present their work and also have feedback from others. And what a powerful way to internalize information when and you've mentioned this in another episode, Brent, where you had your students, you sent the work that they created for Funny and Farsi to the author, and the author responds, right? Now, those students are not going to forget that ever. Yeah. And that is just powerful. Not only did you create something that expresses how students responded to the text, but also you shared it with the person who created that text that created the response in them. And that is communication, right? Because it's not just a one way, like, oh, you completed the assignment, you read the book. It's you've given them an audience, and it's an authentic audience. And because you have the means of getting that information across, now you're able to share it with others. Not only that, but then I also saw I think you tweeted some of the examples, and teachers right away were responding, hey, I want to use that idea. Do you have the template? And you shared the template. And again, that's something amazing, I think. And of course, that also blends the teacher role with what your students did. So you're,
yeah,
multiple.
But that can also be a guide for the students too, because I show them, hey, I'm doing this, and look what else is going on out there, and then they can see the potential for growing. The one thing that it says locally and globally, collaborating locally and globally, and so one thing I have not been good enough about yet, or I hope to build more in the future, is I want to see students interacting with other students in other parts of the world through their activities, right? But I haven't quite figured out how to do that. I mean, we've done things like mystery Skype or whatever, but I really want to see hey, here's a project I'm building. We're here in Southern California, and I'm building this with someone in New York, and we're trying to do this, like a fully, I don't even know who you are. You're in a totally different school, but we are building towards the same goal. And I would love to see some more, some things like that could be really just give people the opportunity to connect all over the place. So that's that's a future goal for me.
Yeah.
So those are all the basics of the ISTE standards, and I hope that everybody got a chance to kind of understand the fundamentals here. It's worth going in on the ISTE website. You can go click through. We'll have them on the show notes for everybody. But you can look at all the examples of these things, and the student ones are great because they have videos.
Yeah, there's videos of the actual students performing some of these roles, and that's really cool. Because if I were a new teacher, or if I were someone who's just browsing through the standards for the first time, and I maybe wouldn't know, if I didn't know what something meant and how it applies, I could click on there, and it's just great. They've done a really good job at revamping the site for these standards.
Yeah, it's outstanding. So definitely worth taking a look at.
All right, it is time for our fun finds. And this time around, I again have something to help with relaxing. I'm an insomniac. I am not an early bird. It is very difficult for me to fall asleep. Anyone who's known me knows that my mind is always racing. If I get an idea, my brain just doesn't want to quiet down. So recently I went and found an organic tea. It's not a expensive tea. I got it from Target. It's called Puka, Pukka. It's the nighttime organic one, and it's an oat flower, lavender, and lime flower mix, and it's really good. And I just use that, at night, or I've been trying to cut back on coffee.
Not familiar with that idea.
And so I'm switching over to tea for the time being. And of course, it's winter. It's not winter yet, but it's getting really cold. So it's kind of nice to have tea.
Yeah.
And so that's my fun find.
Awesome. So mine is if you have not heard of on Twitter, they have the thing called Twitter Fleets, which is basically just Instagram stories, or every app for whatever reason has decided that they want to have stories at the top of their app, and I absolutely loathe them. They are really they're really destructive to the Twitter experience. I mean, for me, it's like, this is not what Twitter is about, right? They're just trying to turn it into like that kind of picture as the experience, that side of the communication, which is fine over on the other things, but I think I am bothered by the idea that all of these apps are kind of merging into one kind of same app. And so anyways, Twitter Fleets, you've seen them if you're on Twitter on your phone. I haven't seen them on the browser, but basically there's a row at the top, and you click on the little icons of each person, and then they basically have an Instagram story up there. But I don't want to see those, and so I figured out a hack, which is when you go click on those at the top, you can go immediately and hit the three dots. So you go watch any fleet on there, and then you click the three dots, and then what happens is if you hit the down, not the three dots, there's a down arrow, and then it says mute. So you can mute that account, but it doesn't mute it completely. It says, do you want to mute fleets, or do you want to mute tweets and fleets? And so you can just click on the red button that says mute fleets, and then at the top of my screen, I no longer, it took a little while because everybody who's doing it or experimenting with it or whatever, whenever they show up, you have to mute each person the first time. So if you're following a lot of people, that'll take a while, but it's kind of slowly, just, hey, every once in a while it comes up. Now I mute it. And so now I basically don't ever see fleets in my timeline at all, which makes me much happier.
So if you've got 10,000 followers, good luck clicking mute individually.
Yeah, but not everybody's doing them. So it does kind of happen over time, right? So, just when you're sitting on the toilet, I think it's a good time to go mute fleets.
Well, they don't bother me so much, but I'm not a fan. I'm just neutral. I don't really care for them.
Yeah, they bother me. So I'm hoping they disappear completely.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to the show. As always, you could win a one-of-a-kind DIESOL pin by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're giving us a shout out any other way, tag us on social media so that we know that you are there.
For show notes and other episodes, everything, you can go to diesel.org/30. That's the number 30. We would love to, we have a lot of information. We put up transcripts now too, Esol, which is, I think that's a good addition.
That's pretty cool.
I'm still trying to backlog them. It'll take a while, but we do have transcripts. So if you want to just kind of scan through everything, go take a look at that. Of course, we are on Twitter. We are not, I'm not putting up fleets. Are you putting up fleets, Esol, for DIESOL?
No.
Okay. So find the show
I draw the line at TikTok.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. So you can find the show at DiesolPod, DIESOLPOD, and you can find me at Brent G. Warner.
You can find me, Esol, at IXY_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
In Uzbek, thank you is Rahmat. So, Rahmat for tuning in to the DIESOL podcast. Thanks, everybody.